channel. If you are new here, my name is Amara. I am a yoga teacher currently based in Dubai, but not based in Dubai for much longer. I'm actually relocating to London in just under 2 weeks. So if you're in London and fancy flowing a little bit later after this video is posted, I'm out and about in London, but for the time being, I'm here in Dubai. And today's video is going to be a yoga teacher Q&A. So for those of you that follow me on Instagram, I put a little question box up for new yoga teachers, just asking, what are your biggest questions? What do you want to know? And I thought that I would sit down. I've got a big old matcha because I've got a big day of work to do today, but I thought I would sit down in between classes and just film this Q&A. I also think I'll pop in a few of just like the really common questions I get asked all the time as well, just in here in case anyone is interested. Before we do begin, I always caveat this by saying if you are a new teacher and you are wanting to make the transition into a career in yoga, I do actually have a yoga teacher mentorship that is going live in September. It's already open for pre-sale, so if you wanted to get it at kind of like the lowest price that we do it at, feel free to check the link below. It's a 10-week course where I guide you through everything you need to know to start your career in yoga. We talk about energy, we talk about really important business knowledge, we talk about your core values, how to find your students, your revenue streams, how to make money as a yoga teacher, career progression, and so many other things within that 10-week course. So I will just pop the link below if that is something that you feel like you are called towards, if you're wanting to make this transition into becoming a full-time yoga teacher, but maybe don't know what that looks like for you at the moment. Maybe you're struggling to find information, because I know for me, when I made that transition, I was really struggling to find information because no one talks about it. So if that is something you need, I cannot recommend coming and joining me enough, because I really do feel that having guidance and having mentors within these stages for me was really pivotal, so it could be the same for you. With that being said, let's dive straight into the questions. So I actually have them on my phone. To give me a moment, let me find them. First couple of questions. These were really good questions. You guys asked really in-depth questions, which I just love. I love feeling like people are as passionate about teaching yoga as I am, because I'm such a yoga nerd. So the first question was, how do you memorize flows and cues? Cueing to instruct when not demonstrating at the same time. Okay, so the first thing I guess is memorizing flows and cues. Now I think that sometimes as teachers we get a little bit caught up in remembering our flow. The truth is of the matter is I don't remember my flows. I leave room for creativity in the moment. There's nothing really to memorize because no one else knows what you're trying to do, right? So usually I have a rough idea in mind in terms of how I want to teach that class. To be honest, usually I have a theme. So I might have a theme of hip openers, I might have a theme of surrender or self-love, and then I'm teaching poses that I feel complement that theme. So the class could change every single time. I think the more you practice it maybe beforehand, if you're worried about it, like practice it the morning before you teach it, or have it in your self-practice, then it's really easy to remember. But I think a more important skill maybe to cultivate is that sort of thinking on your feet skill of like, okay, I've forgotten something, that's okay. What can I add in instead? What other poses work here? And I think the more almost literate you become moving around your mat without being guided, you're going to become more comfortable in the moment where you're like, oh my gosh, I've forgotten what my next pose is. What other pose would work from here? That sort of quick thinking skill. And I think that that's quite a helpful skill to build. Obviously you can write flows down. I have an entire book where I write down all of my themes and any poses that I like with them. But to be honest with you, it's very unusual that I teach the same class twice, because my aim is not to remember the flows. In terms of cues, I would say that I tend to, maybe this is controversial, but I tend to stick to very similar cueing. I know that some teachers will say, oh, you should mix it up and make it different. I kind of disagree with that. I think that actually I want my cueing to be as consistent as possible. Obviously, I might mention slightly different areas of the body that I want you to adjust, but for the most part, my cues into certain poses are pretty consistent. So once I know my cues into chaturanga, for example, I will repeat the same thing. And to be honest, I don't see any issue with repetition. I think this is really Some teachers will, I personally don't, because as a student, I really appreciate repetition because I know what's coming next. It helps me to then really sink into my practice and not worry about, oh gosh, she's phrased something a little bit differently and now I'm not sure what she wants me to do. I do, however, of course, maybe give a different alignment cue. The second part is how to cue and instruct when you're not on the mat. Okay, I have a few tricks for this. First things first is you got to practice. Get off the mat as quickly as you can as a teacher, and that was advice I was given when I first started teaching. I cannot stress this enough, how important it is for you to get comfortable stepping off the mat if you're adjusting people, if you're just observing your students. But practice, practice, practice. I actually heard someone say recently that every time you go into teaching a class, there should be something you're practicing as a teacher. You should be practicing stepping off the mat or correcting your cueing, whatever it might be. So go into your classes and practice this stepping off the mat, and you will get more comfortable being able to cue. I usually don't step off the mat for the first round. So like for the first round on the right side, I won't step off the mat. I'll show them, and then maybe on the left side, I will step off the mat. What that does mean is my body's a little bit uneven. Okay, the next question is a really common one that I get asked. Bearing in mind, I also used to lead yoga teacher trainings here. So I have taught an awful lot of teachers. I must have taught almost 100 teachers, which honestly fills my heart, in this exact studio actually as well. But that actually just fills my heart with so much joy. I love you guys so much. You're here. I love you. You're like my children. I adore you. But back to what I was saying. This question is advice to people who are really, really nervous as they don't feel like they have a slim enough body and can't do every pose. First of all, I cannot stress enough, there is no ideal body type for yoga, and this is such a disgusting stereotype that I feel that has been created in the West, that you have to look a certain way to do yoga. There is no certain way you need to look to do yoga. Everyone can access yoga. I truly do believe yoga is for everyone if they want to practice it. So first things first is there is no body type that you need to be as a teacher. It doesn't indicate how strong you are. It doesn't indicate what poses you can do. It has nothing to do with that. One thing I would say is that, okay, first things first, in terms of the poses that you feel like you can't do, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret here. No teacher can do every pose. They're teaching the poses they can do. I don't teach poses I can't do because I'm not an expert in them, therefore it's not my place to teach them. Teach what you can do. Continue deepening your own practice outside of teaching and teach what you can do. You only ever need to be one step ahead of the students. You don't need to be an expert because students learn from someone who's one step ahead of them. So don't worry about being at the finished product. I'm going to give you a hint. There's no finished product here, but stop worrying about needing to be able to do every single pose. Teach the poses you're comfortable with. Teach the poses you can do. You only need to be one step ahead. The second part of this question being around the self-consciousness around your body. First of all, I hear you and I'm sending you so much love because you're not the only one that feels this way. I know so many people that do. Having you be a teacher in the body you're in right now, you are giving permission for other people who relate to your body type, in the sense of being able to see a teacher with the similar body type to you shows you that anything is possible. It shows you that the practice truly is for you. You get to lead the way, and I really did speak about this at length in the last yoga teacher mentorship because I had a few people in there that had those same sort of worries, and we worked through them. We really did a lot of shadow work into this to really, really acknowledge that the areas that feel challenging for you are your gifts as a teacher. So I'm going to leave it there because otherwise I think I'll get a little bit carried away with that question. Next question. Okay. The next question is how to overcome the insecurity of I don't know anything from the first time. Okay, you know something. You finished your 200 hours. So you know something. Even if you feel like you don't know anything, you do. And I actually think that the best way to do this is to go and teach, because you will be shocked the amount you do know when you start teaching. This sounds like a really overthinky thought here of your ego saying you don't know enough. Now, I will say that as teachers, we're constantly learning. We're constantly growing. What you know right now, you will know twice as much in a year's time, but you have to start somewhere. And through virtue of just doing a 200 hour, I guarantee you know more than the majority of the students that are in front of you. And again, that's all you need. You only need to be one step ahead of the students as a new teacher. So stop worrying about being an expert, because first of all, there's no real experts in the whole practice. You might be an expert in a certain area, but also that's not what people need. Sometimes they want it, of course, and sometimes we do need it, but in an everyday class, people don't need the expert. They need someone to hold the space for them. So don't worry about feeling like you don't know everything. You know enough. Teach what you're comfortable with, teach what you do know, and it will build your confidence to then start teaching the things that maybe you were a little bit more uncomfortable with. So hopefully that helps. The next question. Did you start paying taxes straight away when you quit your job and started your yoga business? Now, I started my yoga business here in Dubai, so we don't pay taxes here, income tax here. So with that being said, this wasn't something that I needed to think about necessarily. However, what I did need to do was pay for my visa and things like that. So that was a big thing that I had to invest at that sort of stage. What I would say is if you are really serious about this being your career, depends where you are in the world. There is a certain tax bracket, I know, in a lot of places. So if you're making below the tax bracket, you don't have to pay taxes, but you should probably register yourself as a business or as a freelancer or as someone who's self-employed. Because if you want this to be your career, you need to take it seriously as well. So I would really, really recommend that if it is a position where you need to pay taxes, if you're earning any income, yes, pay those taxes, because this is your long-term career. We should really start it how we mean to go on and create really beautiful foundations to grow from, rather than having to take steps backwards in a year's time because we didn't set things up properly at the beginning. This is something, again, that I talk about an awful lot within the mentorship and how to set all of those foundations. But I guess with this question, it really, really depends on where you are in the world. Here in Dubai, we don't pay taxes. Where I'm from, I don't pay taxes. But I know in the UK, which I'm currently moving to, as soon as I get there, I will set myself up and sort myself out for what taxes that I need to pay. And again, look into your country. You may have a certain threshold that if you're under it, you don't have to pay taxes. Ideally, you're going to be over that anyway. So I definitely would get everything in place and just know what I needed to do for that, so there are no surprises later on. Because one thing about being self-employed is that it's all your responsibility. So let's take that responsibility from day one so it doesn't come around to bite us later on. The next question is a really, really good one. It is, how do you not get burnt out and be overwhelmed with social media, advertising, marketing, and things like that? Okay, if I'm being honest, sometimes I definitely do get a little bit overwhelmed. Sometimes, especially at the moment when I'm in the middle of moving, this is the maybe part that slips a little bit, but there's a lot of things here. I think first things first is, and again, we talk about this in the mentorship so much, sorry, you're gonna get so bored of me hearing that, but first things first is you need to acknowledge that social media, whatever platform you choose to use, you do not need to be using every platform. It depends where your students are. But any platform you choose to use, whatever social media marketing you choose to do, is part of your job as a yoga teacher, right? If you don't have people in your classes or people on your membership or whatever it might be, you can't do your job as a yoga teacher. It might affect how much you're earning as a yoga teacher. So I think first things first is really taking a step back and acknowledging that this is part of your job as a yoga teacher. So if, for example, you are leaving 10 minutes at the end of the day at 10 p.m. to post your Instagram post, would you do that to plan your class? Probably not, right? You would probably set aside time. This is my class planning time. And it should really be the same for social media, or whatever marketing you choose to do. So for me, every Monday I set aside some time, and that is my time to plan content, edit videos, plan what I want to share, think about how I need to do my marketing for that week, and I set aside that time. I also will write captions during that time, and I also usually have a plan for how often I want to post on social media. This is what I would really, really recommend. Now, you may not stick to this plan, but having a plan to begin with can be really, really helpful so that you have an idea. You don't necessarily need to be posting every single day, but maybe you start with 3 times a week just to have that there and have that ready. But I think the best way to not get overwhelmed with this is, yes, have a plan, treat it as part of your job, set aside time for this rather than it being an afterthought, because this is a big part of our job as yoga teachers. Another thing I would also say is have a weekend off. You will notice if you follow me on Instagram, I don't tend to post an awful lot on the weekends. It's because that's the time where my boyfriend isn't working and I love to spend my time with him, and I'm practicing yoga by being fully present with him on the weekends. So you don't tend to hear from me an awful lot on the weekends on social media. I also don't teach on the weekends, so it's a little bit easier for me. But I have those 2 days off so that when it gets to Monday, I feel a little bit more refreshed. And you absolutely can do that. Treat it like a job, and then you set the boundaries you would also have with your job. I think boundaries are really, really important when it comes to doing jobs that you love, because sometimes otherwise we do get overwhelmed because we're constantly doing them and not giving ourselves a break. The next question we touched on this a little bit in a question before, but how to have confidence when teaching a group class. Practice makes perfect, I would say with this. There's definitely a little bit of fake it till you make it. I would also say that you cannot read people in a group class. If you're looking around and being like, they don't look like they're having fun, I would be like, you cannot read people when they're in a class. Sometimes people do look like they're having the worst time, but they're having the best time. So don't worry about what people look like. Don't worry if they don't look like they're having a good time. Practice makes perfect. Fake it till you make it. You are going to be nervous. But I also think there is an element of listen to what lights you up. If you find that you've taught a fair few group classes and you just don't love it, I think that's also really, really valid. Maybe you want to be focusing on teaching more privates or something like that as well. I know for me, I'm the opposite. I love teaching group classes. I don't actually love teaching privates. So also really tune into, is it a confidence thing or is it just the fact that you don't enjoy it that much, which is also fine. It's not the only way to be a yoga teacher. But otherwise it would really just be practice makes perfect. Practice makes perfect, right? So do it as much as you physically can, and if there are any sort of limiting beliefs you have there, maybe it's taking that time to really sit with them and work through them and journal on them. Sorry guys, my camera decided to overheat on me. That's device summer for you. Okay, the next one is how to build trust with your students. Now I think building trust with your students is quite a big topic. I think in terms of building trust with your students, quick things that you can do is showing a lot of respect for your students. So asking about adjustments before just doing, so that they know that you can trust that you're not going to adjust them without asking. I think that's a massive one with building trust. I think also this actually comes from practice as a teacher. The more you teach, the more you will begin to recognize people's bodies and understand the way in which they're moving and begin to recognize things sooner. So the more you can help people deepen their practice, whether it be through doing really, really safe adjustments, whether it be through providing little tweaks in their alignment that help them to move a little bit better, I think those are the best ways to really build trust, is obviously creating that safe space of asking for permission before touching people, but also the level of beginning to understand how the body moves a little bit more. Maybe that means you're doing a little bit more anatomy studying, and really helping people find depth. I think and this is actually, you may not love this, but the more people see tangible results or physical results within your class, quite often that is the more that they will trust you. So get really confident with supporting people in some of those more challenging postures. So maybe you become confident teaching people how to headstand or something like that, because when you help students realize that they're capable of more, that's when you begin to build trust. So I think becoming a little bit more comfortable cueing some of these more, they're not necessarily challenging, but some of these more technical postures can be a really easy way to build trust in your students, because you've safely guided them through a posture that they found challenging. So I guess that's my little bit of advice, but this also comes with time. The more people come to your classes, the more people know you, the more comfortable and trusting they will be. The question is how to be unique when teaching a yoga class. And this is a really interesting question because I have a lot of feelings around this. I think that sometimes we try a little bit too hard to be different. And my question is with this is, First of all, nothing in this practice is new. This is an ancient practice, so nothing you're coming up with is brand new and completely unique because it's an ancient practice. But my question to you would be, do you believe that yoga works? Do you believe deep in your core that yoga works? If you believe this, why do you need to teach something different? What's wrong with the basics? What's wrong with the tradition of the practice? Because yoga works. You don't need to make it unique. You don't need to repackage it. You don't need to make an extreme effort to make it your own, because yoga as itself works. Why would we need to change it and make it more unique? Now, different teachers teach in different ways, absolutely, and just teaching a class, it's going to be infused with your energy, and that will make it a little bit different to another teacher. I think this question, a better way to ask this question would be how to find your personal style as a teacher, because you're not going to necessarily teach unique classes or poses, but how can you find your style as a teacher? Really sink into what you're good at. What do you enjoy practicing yourself, and what are you really, really good at? If maybe you love teaching slower classes and stretching classes, maybe you love teaching power vinyasa or yin, really tuning into what you're good at and finding your style within that. What do you like? What are important to you? What are your core values as a teacher? This is something I stress so much. We spend so much time in the mentorship talking about this, because your core values will then influence the way you teach. So for example, some of my core values are intuition and flow. So this idea of within my classes, I want to create space for people to begin to follow their intuition a little bit more on the mat. I also really, really have a lot of respect and integrity for finding this fluidity within my classes without compromising some of the technicalities. So like, we're not going too quickly, but I do want things to flow and have this sort of choreography to them in a way, so that it really feels like a moving meditation. That isn't me being unique. That isn't me necessarily coming up with something new. That is me finding what's important to me as a teacher and my style, and then running with that. So I think less stress on things being unique. Really sit with the fact that you don't need to come up with anything new. Through coming up with something new, you're saying that yoga's not enough. What we need to do is see where we fit in this world of yoga, and how through our energy we want to share this ancient practice. Because remember, we are just a vessel for the practice. It's not us. We're not actually, when I teach an amazing class, it's not really me who's done the healing or who's done the work. It's yoga that's done the work. I'm just here to hold space for it. I'm just here to facilitate that. It's not about me, right? So I hope that makes sense. I would definitely encourage you to explore that question more of like, what is my style, rather than how do I become unique and different to others, because that's something that should come really, really naturally if you're just sharing the practice really authentically within your own energy. I would also say to really sit with yourself with this. Quite often, I think sometimes we look for our unique style in other teachers, but just make sure it's something that's authentic to you as well. Okay, next question. The next question is how to deal with imposter syndrome when first starting to teach. Again, I feel like we're having a few repeat questions here, but yeah, with imposter syndrome, it's a limiting belief, right? So if you're dealing with imposter syndrome, there's that level of like, you don't belong here. What is it that makes you feel like you don't belong here? And know that you do. There is space for everyone. And until you believe you're a teacher, I think imposter syndrome sometimes comes from needing that external validation to be like, I'm here, and it's all okay, but do you really feel like you deserve to be here? And if you don't feel like that, why don't you? And really sitting with actually, I am capable, using those affirmations of like, I do belong here, I am capable, I am allowed to take up space within the yoga world, right? And know that I think a lot of teachers deal with this at the beginning, that feeling of like, oh my goodness, like, do I belong here? Am I allowed to do this? But yes, imposter syndrome is just like, it's the ego trying to keep you safe. The ego being like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But in reality, remember that you are allowed to be here, and imposter syndrome it's just that limiting belief within you. So can you really work with it and sort of think, okay, well, this is nerve-wracking, but I also think it will fade. The more you teach, the more the imposter syndrome will fade, the more you assimilate yourself into yoga as a practice as well. I think it will fade more. Something else that I could say that might be really, really helpful here, and maybe this is why you feel that little bit of imposter syndrome, is, are you living a very yogic life? Because I think when you are embodying the practice, not just as a yogi and on the mat, but when you are truly living and breathing yoga every single day as a lifestyle, there's not really room for imposter syndrome, because you know deep down that you can practice yoga. So that would be something that I really encourage you to explore if you aren't already, is how can I live more yogically, and how can I embody this practice off of the mat? Because then yoga is just going to be so a part of who you are, you won't be able to feel that imposter syndrome. That's at least how I think I would cope with it. Question is a really, really good question, actually. So it's, how do you know what to price your classes with at the start? So I think that with this is really going to depend on your area. It depends also what class you're teaching. So if you're teaching a group class or a private class, what I would suggest with this is try and figure out what other teachers in your area are charging and charge similar to them. Don't undercut. You can go over if you feel that you are worth more, but I would never, ever, ever undercut the teachers within your community. There are two reasons for this. First things first is if you, see that everyone in your community is charging $50 for a private, and you decide, I'm gonna charge $30 so I'm cheaper than everyone else. First of all, if you do this, you're cheapening the practice of yoga. Everyone's going to be like, oh, why is everyone else so expensive? When in reality, you're probably like, well, no, it is worth 50, but I just want the clients. So you're cheapening the practice when doing this. Another thing is through being the lowest price, you will attract bargain clients. And let me tell you, bargain clients and bargain students are much harder work than the students that already see your value. If they're looking for a bargain, that tells you that they do not see the value in what you have to offer and therefore want it cheaper than what everyone else is selling it for. I don't know about you, but I would not want to be the bargain yoga teacher personally. So I'll just put that there. If, for example, you were hosting a class like in a community center, so it wasn't in a studio and you wanted to host a group class, I would usually charge just a little bit less than studio prices, because obviously you're not in a studio space. But that's just something that's sort of a gauge that you can work with. And the last question I am going to cover is a question I get an awful lot, is how I made the transition from my full-time job as a school teacher to my full-time career in yoga, how long it took me, and any tips on it. Now again, this is like career changes we speak about so much in the yoga teacher mentorship. Sorry, you're gonna get so bored of me saying that, but we do chat about it an awful lot. But for what I can sort of say in a short little end bit of this video, for me, first of all, it's going to be different for everyone. Your transition from your full-time job into a career in teaching is going to be different for everyone. It will look slightly different. Your timeline is going to look slightly different. For me, the transition, it depends when you really, really think. So I was teaching yoga whilst I was working full-time. I was still teaching yoga in the evenings and on the weekends. So I was already part-time teaching before I quit my job, right? So I had already started teaching in that sense. And then I spent a lot of time saving. So I put aside enough savings that I could get 2-3 months. So I left my job in August and I had just about enough savings to get me to the end of the year. That felt safe enough for me. So I had until the end of the year to get things picked up and to pick up a few classes and sort of get off my feet as a yoga teacher. And that really, really worked for me personally. So it took me about, I would say 3 or 4 months to feel as if I was really at least pulling in that living income and beginning to sort of meet what I was earning before. Now, bear in mind, I was a school teacher before in the UK, so I wasn't earning loads before. So when I say what I was earning before, it was still a fairly low amount. But yeah, I'd say it took me about 3 to 4 months. It's going to be different for everyone. Everyone's situation is a little bit different, but my biggest bit of advice would be to sort of have those savings put aside, because the last thing that you want is to become really, really desperate for classes and sort of enter into that desperate energy, because that is not going to attract what you want as a yoga teacher. So my biggest bit of advice would be to have savings, have a support system, and we talk about this so much, but have that support system, know your plan, and give yourself time. It's not going to happen immediately, and even after those 3 to 4 months, I definitely wasn't at like the peak of my career. I had just got myself onto my feet and was beginning to really feel as if I was like, yeah, I've done it. I'm a full-time yoga instructor now. So yeah, obviously there's so much more we can say there, but I don't want this to be a hugely long video. But I really, really hope that this was helpful. I hope that it helped answer some of your questions. If you have any other questions, feel free to pop them in the comment below. Okay, forgive if you can hear the AC in the background, but just for the sake of finishing this video, thank you so much for joining me. I really, really hope that this was helpful. As always, if you have questions, connect with me on Instagram. My name is Amara Thompson. Come and hang out. I also post loads of other classes and vlogs here on YouTube, so feel free to go and explore. I also have an online membership. My online membership is Soul Shadow, where I post all of my best classes. As always, the links to these things and the yoga teacher mentorship are in my description below. I'm sending you so much love. I'm sending you so much luck on your journey as a yoga teacher, and I will see you in our next video here on my channel. Bye guys.